Welcome to Career Practitioner Conversations. This podcast is presented by the National Career Development Association. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Melissa Venable, NCDA's Director of Professional Development, and it's my pleasure to host this episode about writing and publishing a career development book. My guests are Sujata Ives and Paula Brand. Sujata is in private practice and the author of Activate Success, Tips, Tools, and Insights to be a Leader in Your Niche. And Paula is the founder of Brand Career Management and the author of The Purple Parachute, a woman's guide to navigating the winds of career change. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for having us today.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Paula.
Same to you, Sujata.
As we were chatting, getting ready to record today, I think a lot of listeners, if we could do a show of hands right now, of people who've thought about writing a book or would like to know more or want to write a book or have that kind of plan in the future, I think there are a lot of people in our field that are doing this. So I'm excited to get some background and insight from you both today. So Sujata, why don't you kick us off and just tell us a little bit about how and why you decided to write a book? Why was that a goal for you?
Sure. So, like many people, it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to write a book through my immigrant story. But I'll tell you what really pushed me to publishing, finishing the book was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was chosen to be in the NCDA Leadership Academy. And that was the exact thing that pivoted me to finish and publish, because I learned so much in the 2 years inside that Leadership Academy. So, and also coupled with the fact that most of the books, academic, educational, nonfiction, and fiction, were written by Westerners, specifically Western Caucasian males, in my graduate school years. So after I started working, 20 years went by, and I decided that writing a book from the perspective of a minority female with a disability would be something very different from a different lens, and one that's not so popular or prevalent on the bookshelves. So I just wanted, through this book, Activate Success, I wanted to bring to light that people must evolve to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Paula, give us your background information.
Okay, and thanks, Sujata. I knew a little bit about your story, but I didn't know all of it, so thank you for sharing that. My story is a little different in terms of my desire to write the book really came out of wanting to scale and reach more people. And also the fact that I found myself saying similar things to clients over and over again, because some things like how to answer an interview question using, challenge, action, and results is sort of staple content for people like us. And so I thought two things. If I put this on paper and recorded it, I could reach a lot more people, because you can't possibly speak or meet individually to the numbers that this information could help. I mean, it's information that we know as career professionals. It's very common sense to us, but I learned over the years it's not common sense to people who aren't in our field. And so wanting to get this information out to more people, to help more people. And then specifically, I'm really passionate about helping women in the workplace. And so that's what determined me to steer the book towards women specifically. So those are the main reasons. And I would say, like Sujata, I sort of always thought it'd be nice to write a book. I can't say, not like when I was 10 years old, since I was a professional adult. And then in 2015, I actually started, and then it really took me about 7 years from start to finish. So I'll leave it at that. We might delve into more aspects of that later.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you're both bringing kind of personal background and your personal stories to your writing, but you've got different audiences and sort of different motives for kind of what this book will do. What do you hope your books will accomplish when they're out there? Paula, we'll start with you on this one.
My hope is that someone who's experiencing a career transition, or maybe is about to experience a career transition, can work themselves through the career transition without needing help from someone else. I mean, that's really my ultimate goal. And the book is designed to do that. It really walks you through the process I would take someone through as an individual, one-on-one meeting as a client. And so that's my hope. But I do want to say that I wrote the book knowing not everyone's going to be able to just read the book and figure it out. That's why we have career professionals. Sometimes you're too close to it. Sometimes you've had trauma. There could be lots of reasons why it's not as simple as just reading this book and figuring it out on your own. But I do know people who have worked with me through the process, who have read the book, who have been able to take what they need from it and move forward. So I know it can be done. I don't want to say that everyone can do that, because I know that's not realistic, and I don't want people to feel like there's something wrong with them. There's even a chapter in the book that says, like, okay, so you've done all this work, and if you're still stuck, here's how you can possibly get more help from a professional from other settings. But that is my hope, that more women don't have to suffer through career transitions and can be more proactive about the process with the book and the information that I'm sharing.
Yeah, super timely, I think, right now with so much
Yes.
change rapidly happening with the job market and just employment in general. Sujata, how about you? What are you hoping your readers are going to take away?
Well, there are some specific things that I wanted to accomplish as a book author. And for example, my work and LinkedIn posts are always ignited through the biopsychosocial cultural spiritual model. I want people to connect the dots between work and life. And work and life has always been thrown into some state of flux, change, and choice. So we saw that through the pandemic, and we're seeing it right now in history. So, albeit this week, the pandemic was really the most challenging time in history for the younger generations. And so I really wanted to take the opportunity to create new definitions for leadership. And especially, I wanted to define self-leading. I wanted to take that energy, that frenzy, that panic, that anxiety, that crises cause, and pivot and reset and focus on self-leading and self-introspection. So really, the message from this book is to gain an understanding of and cultivate the skills that can take them from crises to crises.
You're, again, very timely, and you're both providing some tools that people can take and at least begin to use on their own, and then perhaps collaborate with a career professional or talk with their peers, kind of get things going if they're feeling stuck somewhere. So thank you both for being here and sharing a little bit about what you're writing about and how these books are intended to reach your readers. So let's jump into some of the nuts and bolts of getting those books to your readers, right? From that idea to actually on a shelf. So what are some of the most unexpected things you learned in that writing and publishing process? Paula, I'll kick this one to you first.
Sure. And before I answer that, I just want to say one more thing. If I'm being honest, what I hope to accomplish in the last, to answer your last question, was I really wanted to hold a book in my hand that I had written.
Oh, I love it.
I really wanted that feeling, and it was just as good as I had hoped it would be.
That's a great addition. I think anyone who likes to write and has published work really likes that feeling of seeing it and having it, if it's a magazine or journal or book. So that's really cool.
It's right. Actually, I will digress one more time to just say that I had written an article with Sherazad Aristey in Dick Nodell's newsletter, and I was so excited to hold that in my hand. And then that was the issue that he went online. So it never got a hard. So I
Oh,
sort of like lived through it once where I was like expecting that and that didn't happen. And then so I only had that desire even more.
not quite the same for sure.
Yeah, but similar. So, but to answer your question, some of the unexpected things that I would say, one was how long it took. I knew it could take a long time, but I was not expecting it to take 7 years. So, I would say if you're interested in starting a book, start now because who knows how long it will take you. Things happen, and it's not like I worked on it for 7 years straight. You know, I had 6 months where I'd work diligently every morning for an hour or something like that, and then 6 months where I wouldn't look at it. So it's not a true 7 years, but from beginning to end, it is. And I think you have to kind of plan for that when you're writing a book, is that you're not going to have uninterrupted time for endless amounts of time. So you do have to think of it realistically that way. The other thing that was fun, that was unexpected, but I loved it, was it strengthened my relationships, especially with my mom. She read a draft of it, and she's been my biggest supporter always, and was my portfolio career model before that was even a word. So my sister was the first person I actually shared the first chapter to. She's an author as well, and I just wanted an opinion of someone I trusted, who also had been through the publishing process. And she said, you know, it's great, keep going, and that was what I needed. So those were two unexpected things I say I discovered in the process. What about you,
Thanks.
Sujata?
Um, yeah, thank you so much for that. So, there are a few unexpected things that I didn't consider that I learned about, and a couple of tips, tools, and insights. Definitely the editing process. That process is a lengthy process. And here's the thing, right? Our ego says, wow, this is perfect. And then it goes to the editor, the professional editor, if that's your choice. If you want to publish, self-publish, that's a different thing. But I chose to go to a publisher. And so the book was sent to a professional editor that makes suggestions to you. And so you have to stay humble in that process and accept their perspectives as a professional editor and as a professional one, because they want you to succeed too. And the second one is the costs. So save up your, change in your piggy bank. You can save money if you self-publish, but if you want to go through a publisher and get a professional editor, it will cost a little bit. And my third insight is writer's block. You cannot go set a time aside to write and go to your computer and think that all of this creativity is going to come out. So I suggest that you carry a notebook in your purse, because that's what I did for 3 years. You don't know when inspiration is going to hit. It could be a sight or a smell or just a random thought that's coming through your brain. And you don't want to lose those moments in time. So you want to write those down, then you can go home and expand on those. So those are my unexpected things that you can only learn these things when you actually go through the process.
Oh, you hit on so many things. I have so many questions now. So let's start with you. You mentioned self-publishing and professional publisher. Any thoughts on, are you both of your books are self-published? Is that correct to clarify?
No,
No,
Sujata
No.
went to a publisher.
I went to a publisher and
Got
a
it.
professional editor.
And Paula, yours is self-published?
Mine is self-published, but I did pay a company called Get It Done, and I have them listed in the resource page for the show notes. I did
Perfect.
pay someone to help edit it, design the pages, come up with a cover, things that I have no business doing.
It's good to have a network of people with different skills for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Any pros and cons that you want to discuss for our listeners related to professional publisher versus self-publishing?
If you don't mind, Sujata, I will just add a couple of things. One is that there's a lot of nuances. So it's not even as simple, I don't think, as saying self-publishing or publishing, because there's even like hybrid versions of that, believe it or not, and there's so much information out there. But I think the biggest point and decision making, or the biggest decision to make, whether you go one way or the other, is how much control you want. Because if you go to a publisher, pick the title, they get to pick the cover. My sister hated the cover of her book, but she didn't have a say. I know a fellow colleague who hated the title of the book, but it had to have a number in it. So you just don't really get that control if you go with a publisher. And the other two things I'll say is that most anyone I've talked to who's been published by a publisher is very disappointed with the support they've been given. I would say 20 years ago, it was a much different world, but these days you can't really expect much from a publisher except the allure of it being a publisher and maybe getting an advance. But even that, I've learned that the advance really, in the end, they charge you back, costs of initial printings of books, and it's not as glamorous as it sounds, getting this check for a chunk of money. So control is the biggest thing, and owning the rights to the content. So if you want to do a lot of other things with the content, make a training, make a course, other things like that, you will be much less hindered if you publish it yourself. Now, again, all that, I'm not a lawyer, and there's so many nuances to all of the things I just said, but in very simple terms, it's about control and control of the rights, control of the content.
That's a good start point. Some good questions for folks to start asking if they're thinking about doing this. Yes, Sujata.
What do you think,
Paula, so Paula made some very good points, and I think those reasons that she mentioned are the reasons that I didn't go towards the higher education publishing companies. So I chose companies that were private instead of the higher education ones, because of what Paula just said, the control. And so I chose very wisely. The one that I chose was Spotlight Publishing, and the publisher was a female. So, the theme of women helping women was there. And I did get control, and I did have the say for the title. There were no changes that she made at all. The changes were from the professional editor that I chose. And so it was very easy to work with Spotlight Publishing. So that was a really good point that Paula made. Some of these big publishing houses work very differently than some of the private publishers.
One other thing I wanted to ask you both about, which you mentioned as well so far, is cost. And I know that was something that when we were preparing for this conversation, that was a topic that we wanted to make sure that we get in here. I think that's a good place and sort of unexpected things that you learned about. Sujata, what do you want to address cost in the process?
Yeah, that's right. So, you're hiring somebody for their professional services. And so the publisher, she'll charge you for her services to, get the book published. And part of Spotlight Publishing was to have a launch date and to, have all of the hoopla that comes towards that launch. We talked about endorsements. And so she guided me through the endorsement process, and I was able to secure Marty Apodaca, president of NCDA, who gave me an endorsement for this book, and also Sean Boyens, who is the president of ACA, to write the foreword for this book. That I could not have done this part by myself. I couldn't, wouldn't be even thought about endorsements or things like that. So the cost for her for a private publisher is between 5 to 10,000. Then the editor, the professional editor, is going to be separate. So depending on how many words you have, so the editor will always count the words, not necessarily the pages, because a page might just have a picture or a graphic. So it's done through words. And so prepare to put aside between 3 to 7,000 for the professional editor.
Oh, that's helpful. Paula, you want to add to the cost conversation?
Sure, I do. And then again, in the handout for the show notes, I do suggest setting aside $8,000 to $13,000 for this endeavor. And it might be a little more, a little less. I would say the people I paid to help me get the book published, it was a package deal. So you got the cover and the inside pages and things like that. But I still had to pay an indexer because I didn't have an indexer on staff. And I felt very strongly about being able to have the reader easily look up information later. And honestly, I've used the index myself a lot, so I'm glad I did it. But that was an extra cost. The book launch, is going to cost probably, unless it's like virtual, but if you have it in a physical location, and food and drink and whatever. So those are some of the costs that I would say. And then the actual buying of the books, right? I mean, you can sell them through Amazon and other places, but I always have a stash with me because if someone wants a side copy, I have my own box of books that I literally sign it and then mail it to the person. So at some level, you're going to want some copies. You don't, with print on demand, it's nice. You don't have to have a garage full of copies anymore. And I found that to be also helpful because to just buy little by little, because I've been happy to say that I've gotten a couple of book awards. And, the first time I got it, I thought, I want to have them put it to the cover. Well, of course, just a little more cost, not too much, but, I'm not going to suddenly put it on the design that I didn't make. And then, 6 months later, I got another one. So I had to go back and then when my cousin actually offered to make an audiobook version. She's a voiceover artist, changing careers into that. And I had to pay, again, like $100 to change the cover photo of the book because, of course, the shape on Audible is different than the shape on Amazon. Little things like that. So the biggest costs, though, are the editing, the design. Those are really the biggest ones. And then you might have an indexer, or you might have, if it's a very visual book, you might have to pay a photographer or have an illustrator. My book had nothing like that. So mine had no illustrations, but the costs are going to be dictated partly by all the basic things that Sujata and I have mentioned, but also by the type of book. Again, because if it's very visual, you'll want color. You either have to do black and white or color. There's no I only want color on the diagram on page 133, which is what I wanted. So I had to just pick black and white, but color makes it more expensive. Different fonts, different page types, how thick it is, whether it's white or cream. So there's a lot of little decisions to be made, which is why it's very helpful to have someone. I found it very helpful to have a paid service, someone who's gone through this before, and just ask them, which is better for my type of book. And most of the time their answer was to just go into a library or go to a bookstore and look at other people's and see what appeals to you and what you like. But those are the main costs that I can think of. Yeah. And I do have a funny story. At one point, maybe 7 years ago, I told my husband, I was like, I've done all this research. I hadn't finished the book yet. And I was like, I could see it's going to cost a lot of money. And I don't know what to do. And he said, Paula, why don't you finish writing the book? And then we'll worry about that when I get to it, which was very good advice because it sort of challenged me. I got a little like, okay, I guess I better finish the book. So that put a little fire under me, which was good. But yeah, it's not free. Even if you try to do it all yourself. And I don't suggest that you try to do it all yourself because a career counselor isn't necessarily a book designer. So there are different skills. You might have both those skills, but you might not.
Right. Well said. Well said. Yeah, that priority, right? Get the writing done. Get the
Yes.
content together.
That was an unwanted reality check, but
Well done.
It served its purpose.
Thank you. Those are great points. I think you've sort of opened the lid on the box a little bit to all the details that are involved. And even after you're quote unquote done, there's still maybe some changes and things that are going to require decisions and fees along the way. So for our listeners, what are some of the first steps they should take if they are listening and they're like, what, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. What are some of the first things they should do?
Thank you. I want you to ask yourself some really good questions. The first sentence I wrote down was, everybody wants to be successful. That was my assumption. Then the second, the third, the fourth came. Are you seeking success in the workplace? Why are you seeking success in the workplace and in life? What is that? What does that success look like to you? What do you want to provide for your audience and niche? And how will you arrive at success? So my first thing, my first tip to you is to start putting down questions. Ask yourself questions that you want answered. Now, whatever your topic is, please read as much as you can about that topic. If it's promoting organizational culture, then read as much as you can about that. Read. Then begin writing. On the days that you do not write, please read some more! Exclamation point.
Yes, those are great points. I'm thinking of, there's so many things in my head, but I'm going to try to start with, like you said, starting points. So it sounds really basic, but the very first thing you have to decide is it fiction or nonfiction? Because even that cascades into a series of other answers to your questions, depending on whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And then beyond that, what genre, because obviously you could have different genres for fiction and nonfiction. I would make an outline of all the ideas you have. I personally just did a word dump one day and just kind of typed till I couldn't type any longer, just to get the main ideas that kept repeating in my head that I wanted to make sure were in there. And then actually when I did a word dump and I also did an outline, and I realized later the outline could really be 3 different books. And then that's when I zeroed in on just career transition as the topic for this book. So outlining, just getting things out of your head, setting aside savings, joining writing groups, looking into resources. As Sujata mentioned, there's someone who there's more than one person for all of these things. Someone about book launching, Tim Grell, someone about writing fast, just there's a resource for everything. I think I like Sujata's point of reading a lot of information, but I also think at some level I had to just stop reading, and that's when I realized, okay, it's worth spending, like $6,000 so that I don't have to read all this stuff. So that, because when will I ever need to know again whether I need white or cream for my page? So So those would be, I guess, some beginning steps. And then I would also, if you don't mind, can I share some sort of later points too? It's a
Of
bit
course.
about getting started, but think of a pattern or a process or a method, meaning some people say, I'm going to write 3,000 words a day. That's fine. At one point, I was doing 2 hours in the morning just before anything, kind of before work started, before craziness started. It doesn't matter. And then at some point I had to decide, okay, I just need to hire someone to help me with this. So think about what's going to be your strategy, right? Is it something you're going to only do on weekends or evenings, or are you going to block aside or set aside a block of time, like a week, and go on a writer's retreat? All these things are possible. You can do them all. You can do none of them, but I will say this, no book is magically just going to happen without you planning for it. Is like anything important in life, it's unrealistic to think it's just going to magically happen on its own. So you have to have a plan, and it is an overwhelming process. So just start somewhere and then move on to the next thing. The other thing I would say is be flexible, because my first title was Getting Unstuck, and titles are not copyrightable. So interestingly enough, you can have multiple books with the same title. And so what you start as your working title, someone told me this early on, just have a working title and then move on. And that was great advice, because you could get stuck on just the title, and in 5 years later, it might not be the title that you wanted for the book. So stay flexible, come up with a strategy and a method. And the last thing I'll say is that realize that writing the book is really just part one, even though it seems like that's the goal. Part two is the whole publishing process, whether you're self-publishing or going through a publisher. That's pretty much the editing and looking at designs and structure, getting feedback. Sujata mentioned getting reviewers. I will say that during COVID, since we couldn't go out or anything, I worked a lot on my book, and I was getting feedback from people, and not necessarily reviews, but feedback to make the book better. I got some feedback like, you should have more stories. So I made sure that every chapter ended with a story. And that was really helpful. And later on, I could go back to those people and say, could you write a review? And they were very familiar with the book because they had already helped me with feedback. So I do think, that's a whole process, the publishing, getting feedback, incorporating the feedback, editing, getting the words right, proofreading. That's a whole process in itself. And then the third part is marketing it. Because once you've done all this work, of course, you'd like someone to buy it. So there are people that say, start marketing on day one. And I realize that is very great advice if you are that focused and can think that far ahead. I personally couldn't. I thought, yeah, that sounds like a really good strategy, but I think I just got to focus on getting the book done first. But if you were really clever and savvy, you could buy the domain name for the book the second that you think that's going to be the title and move forward. But things are often going to change. Then the longer it takes you to finish it, probably the more things will change. Like I had written the whole book and then COVID happened. So I had to go back through the whole book and make sure everywhere that I mentioned networking or anything that, didn't mention COVID now included COVID. So it didn't sound like I lived under a rock, kind of thing. Let me stop there. I didn't mean to go too far.
No, good stuff. Sujata, you wanna add any to that?
No, I'd like to kind of talk about that. There are millions of books out there on every subject. So think about how you are going to make your book different. I use the storytelling model. I took the emphasis on self-leading through introspection. The change management piece, I wrote through conflict resolution, and sustainable impact through a term that I coined called an empathy ethic. So anything that your own brain can think of is going to be different than the millions of books that are out there. So bring your individuality to the table. Something that's from your life journey, from your experiences, would just be great.
This has been wonderful. Great advice from both of you. I think you've sparked a number of potential new books out there. Listeners, please check the show notes for this episode. The resources that have been mentioned here will be there linked for you. And Sujata Ives and Paula Brand, I hope that we can get you back for a follow-up conversation on this. I feel like we hit just the tip of the iceberg on what it takes to get a book published.
So, Melissa, I do want to put a little teaser out there. So, because of my experience in the Leadership Academy, Activate Success was born. And guess what? After that, I was asked to be chair of the Leadership Academy class of 2026. And so I already decided that I'm going to use this wonderful experience as chair to publish my second book, which is entitled Perspicacity, The Extraordinary Power of Perception. And I just want to thank NCDA so much for accepting me as I am. They empower me despite my vocal cords. NCDA is my tribe, and I am forever grateful to the staff and leadership. So thank you so much for everything.
Now, NCDA is lucky to have you on board, Sujata. So we really appreciate you sharing your work with us here. Paula, you want to give us a quick look at what your next steps are going to be?
Sure. They're lucky to have both of you, I have to say. And can I just build upon one other thing that Sujata said before I talk about what's next? That was a really good point, Sujata, about looking at what other books exist on the same topic you're speaking about, because you do need it to be different, because there are a zillion books out there, and there's even practically a zillion career books alone. So one good exercise is to look for books about the topic you want to write about and just see what else is out there. And that's actually like a process that you're supposed to do when you publish a book. And just like job search, your book can't be for everyone. So we tell job seekers all the time, you are not marketing to every employer. And I found so many analogies going through this process between job search. It was kind of amusing. You're not going to try to go to every publisher, because not every publisher publishes your type of book. And you do need to make it a little different, because you want to have a compelling reason for someone to read your book versus another book. So great point, Sujata, and it really parallels to our career field in a very real way. So thank you so much for having us on, Melissa, and thanks for the idea, Sujata.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
I'm going, of course, to NCDA in Atlanta, and looking forward to that, because I've never attended as an author.
We'll see you both in Atlanta. I'm excited to see you both in person there as well. Thanks again for being here, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.